here with Andre, we're just talking about all things Greenwood Solutions and the commercial solar field that we're in.
Thanks for having us, Valley.
Thanks for being here. Your official title, and we all know that we all wear multiple hats at Greenwood, but your official title is, at this point in time, is Project Coordinator.
Yeah, so Project Coordination, been with Greenwood for over 4 years now, I think. And yeah, in that time have done everything from literally putting in tin feet on the roof to account director, so leading our sales force for the private sales stuff, and yeah, now doing the coordination of all the projects, which is a sort of a direct correlation with the account director role, which is really to, sort of be in control of our own destiny with our own jobs, is ultimately what my role was and still is, but just with a different name head. And like with anyone who works in small businesses, and Greenwood isn't excluded from that, we wear multiple hats. So on any one day I might be doing something to do with the website, or might be, sort of on site seeing a stakeholder, or I might be up at 9 o'clock at night with a bottle of red wine making the Greenwood Chronicles. It's it's all fun and it's all awesome. And yeah, the job and the role is something I'm incredibly passionate about. And
so you're still an account director as well as a project coordinator. So how do you juggle both? They are related, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Everything sort of works hand in hand. So from where I was being on the roof, when I first started, and to rewind a little bit, I've known Eddie for a very, very long time, since he and my brother were in high school together in year 7. So I've seen Eddie, our sole director at Greenwood, friend, has grown his own company. And yeah, he encouraged me to get out of a sales role that I was in, where the hours and stuff just weren't in favour for a family man. I've got 2 kids, one's 7, one's 4, but at the time they were little tackers. And yeah, it was not just the role, but it was also to do with the right thing, being in the renewable energy industry. It's something that I've always been passionate about. So it worked out really, really well. And then from being on the roof, because I wanted to really understand the craft of what is that I was eventually going to sell as the account director, we went to multiple jobs around Victoria, and yeah, they were both good times during the day and good times at night, because you're having a good old time. But to really get an understanding of what is involved with solar, and not just to be our account director selling stuff, practice what you preach, as they say, to really have an understanding of how it affects a small business when there's people at your place doing work, and then through account direction, we've always at Greenwood had, I suppose, different facets of the business, with it be tenders, whether it be operational maintenance, whether it be, the grid safe boards, etc. And I was, and still am, left to my own devices, where we really sort of, I just take care and handle everything from the start of the grid connection through to, obviously the paperwork, ensuring teams on site through, our scheduling department, shout out to Pat, the go-to-woe, the one-stop shop within Greenwood, which is your one-stop shop, because we're all in-house. So taking those crafts and bestowing them to a more big picture now, which is the project coordination role. So at any one stage, on any one day, we've usually got 2 or 3 projects going. By the end of March, we will have been on 23 roofs. I think it's a huge advantage to have, been on the roof, in this project coordination role. Is it an absolute necessity?
Yeah,
I would say no. I'm lucky enough that I came from a project management point of view. So I've worked in a previous life, literally in Australia, and lived in Hong Kong for a few months of the year, and travelled the world in the bicycle industry. And it's sort of the same but different, where you've got nothing, and then all of a sudden you start building a project, be it a bike or whatever it is. So where are the wheels going to come from? Where's the frame going to come from? What manufacturers? And that's relayed in the project coordination thing for any job, whether it be solar or a manufacturing plant, or a cafe, whatever it is. There's always something that you build nothing, and then all of a sudden there's something. The burger buns come from somewhere, the ham comes from another place, you're getting cheese from somewhere else. So it's definitely put me in good stead, and in all roles that I've worked in my career, it's always been pretty similar styles, where it's like, all right, we've got a plan, we need to execute it. How do we do it?
This leads me on to the question that, and I'll preface this question with, I learnt the hard way, right?
Mm.
The importance of documentation. You're juggling, multiple projects. At the moment, how many projects are you coordinating on?
Yeah.
Not mentioning your account directing
Yeah.
as well, because we know how many hats are being worn.
So, for example, this week we kick off about 3 different jobs in essence. So it's, a crane lift happening tomorrow. We've got a crane lift happening on Friday for University of Melbourne to get that down. Next Monday we start a job over in Cheltenham for a 225 kilowatt system. And at any one time I'd say there's 3 jobs. And by the end of March we will have been on 23 different job sites around Victoria. And that's...
What, just this year?
Yeah.
And these are not small jobs. We're not talking small domestic, like 5 kilowatt standard grid connect. We're talking commercial.
Yeah.
We're talking complicated battery storage, residential and commercial jobs. We're talking a fair range.
Yeah, it's so dynamic, and because it's dynamic, it's never the same thing twice. There's no copy and pasting, which would be awesome sometimes, but we're wrapping up one of the biggest roof mount solar systems in the Southern Hemisphere. Give a shout out to what's happening over at Ocado for Coles, which is a massive rollout. And at the same time, up in rural Victoria, putting in Sungrow batteries. We're doing residential battery systems for people in the Dandenongs that have had residential power issues. So we want to help them out as well. At the same time, in the background, there's many different projects, part of our rollout for council tenders and. A lot of moving pieces, but it's remarkable what we can do as a team, and having a team of about 32, it makes life easy. We just got to make sure we always have the right pieces in the right places.
And that's the thing to me with these, like for a company or a solar installer looking to transition from retail domestic jobs to commercial jobs. The principles are the same. Obviously, we're talking about electricity, we're talking about solar panels and inverters. It's just everything scales up, and that's where mistakes can be made. A good example is like people on site. You've got 12 guys on site, materials are supposed to arrive, and they don't arrive, or they arrive in the afternoon. So from your perspective, being project coordination, how do you ensure that stuff does arrive on site in a timely manner, and what's your plan B if it doesn't in most cases?
Yeah, it's really taking a deep breath and pausing when there's really big moments of anything. So, I literally rewrite the address for any job that goes out, and I also put a yellow highlight through it on Gmail. Why? Because I know we're all human. I once delivered stuff that was meant to go to Sorrento to Werribee, and the stuff that was meant to go to Werribee to Sorrento. And we've got 2 different teams. I learnt the hard way. And this was at Greenwood, and we all make mistakes, and it's a case of like, all right, well, what do you do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And Eddie's really good at understanding that stuff happens, but it's a learning experience. So clear documentation. So we use Monday.com, which is a really easy management tool to see exactly what every step of the job has, and you can change it to do, coming up, not applicable. So I use that a lot during the day.
Regardless of the platform, you're talking effectively it's a checklist. Like in the old days, it'd be a piece of paper, be foolscap paper, it'd be pen, you'd be writing out what needs to be done and checking it off.
Yeah, and I still do that as well. So even like computer screens blend into each other, and you can have all these different tabs open, and I still, and it's probably not one around now, but because I work from the factory as well, but before I start my day, which sometimes starts as early as 6 a.m. or whatever, it doesn't matter, I write down what I want to achieve, and then from a hierarchical point of view, what is critical, i.e. we got a crane that's being lifted tomorrow, what has to be done for that to work smoothly. Update our website with a new font or something. Not a huge priority. So I adjust. But I write it down and it's always in front of me. So I'm always looking at it. It's tangible, something you can hold. I'd say that's been something that's been of huge benefit.
So it seems like you've got your ability to prioritise is pretty well honed.
Yeah, and learning from it, and learning what works and what doesn't work, and getting advice from people on the sites, which is huge. It's not a one-man show by any stretch. It's listening to the team every time I am afforded the opportunity to go out to site for starters, but then relaying that back to the 7 or 8 individuals who work in our office and trying to make life as smooth and as easy as possible to deliver awesome projects and delight the customer. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so easy to become complacent when you've got customers and falling into that. It's a lot of businesses make that mistake if they've got a customer, especially if they're doing selling a product on a regular basis, like we do the grid safe board, and our grid application process, and we've got quite a few customers who come back to us. It's so easy to become complacent and not to service their needs. And at the end of the day, cliched as it sounded, it is all about forging these relationships and maintaining them. But I wanted to ask you an interesting thing about these large sites. And I know, we've been on them. They can effectively, on the really big commercial sites, be like outdoor factory work. How is worker fatigue, both physically and mentally, dealt with from your perspective? Because you've seen these, so you've been on them. You know what it's like.
Yeah, no,
it's a big thing, isn't it?
The first job I ever did was at a hospital grade manufacturing facility in Alphington, and it was real hot. It was 35 degrees. No mayo. I drank about 12 litres of water that day. Yep. And it was boiling hot, but at the same time, the leading hands on site said, guys, it's getting up to around midday now. Let's cut it off. We're done. It's too hot. First day I loved this because it was, I wasn't used to carrying panels, so I was a bit sore, but that's
and they're getting big now.
Yeah,
they're big.
But it's a case of, at Greenwood, it's listening to each other, and we've got our own fatigue management policy that was created in the situations of everything from sun to high winds to safety and things like that.
It's a juggling act, isn't it? Like from a business perspective, if you're looking at making a dollar, and that's why most businesses are in operation. But taking into consideration workers' expectations, like for instance, we've got apprentices. And you've got your A grades, and this is like a master-apprentice relationship going back like thousands of years. They need to learn, they need to progress and feel empowered with what they do. But also there's certain tasks that are laborious and boring, and that has to all be taken into consideration. So to me, it's a constant balance that everything's shifting all the time. Would you? Is that your perspective?
Absolutely valid. Yeah, especially on the commercial sites where you might be. I worked on a distribution centre like on the roof where we had, I think it was 3 or 4 days of literally just attaching feet to the clip lock, foot that goes onto the roof with no penetration. So, how do you keep it dynamic is to mix up your tasks here and there and to be as time effective as possible as well. And then and being transparent with the leading hand, it was, if you get a sore back or something like that, or you feel like you're getting a bit tight, just mixing it up, changing positions, or being able to, maybe do a different task sort of thing. But with all of our sites, we have a large amount of people on them at any one time, between, depending on the size of the site, of course, between 2 and 12 people. So there's always different tasks to do, but obviously staying within a zone of comfort for not only the person but also the leading hand, who's ultimately the A grade, and they're the ones signing off the work. So it's not a case of ever being like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to do something that I don't know how to do or something. You never get in that situation, you hope. So it's to just keep it spicy and mix things up, and luckily with jobs we do, there's always something happening with different things.
So this is the thing, if you're doing one project, it's easier than doing 3. And the degree of difficulty is it's a non-linear relationship, because something happens on project 2, the leading hand gets COVID, for instance, or stuff that was supposed to come on Tuesday is coming on a Thursday. So things get shifted around on that project, which affect project 1 and project 3. So it really is a case of having that finger on the pulse, I suppose, and having contingency plans in place to go, if that happens, we do that. Or if that happens and that happens, we do that, and that.
Yeah, and direct communication with all the leading hands on site as well. So I make a habit of calling, as many as I can within the time frame to not also get in their way if they're doing, hardcore electrical work for a shutdown. Just to touch base, I think it's, as I said, it's super critical to get improvement from the team. What have we done right? What can we do better? And that in turn then makes things go smoother, but also follow-ups. So I've for tomorrow, so we have a crane lift happening at a new supermarket development where there's literally 70 subcontractors, and we're lucky enough to be the preferred installer for the solar.
Wow.
But there's no asphalt down, and the roof has just had the roof sheets laid down, and there's so many moving parts. We've got to get a crane driver to come in, upload swims to Hammertech, etc., following up to make sure from the client's point of view, are you happy with everything? Is everything good to go from your side? Yep, we're cool. Awesome. We'll see you tomorrow.
So that's the other thing, isn't it? We've been talking about our jobs and our guys, but what about all the stakeholders? And it seems like on these big commercial jobs, it's not the stakeholders, just not the client. It is the neighbour. It is the public. I mean, for instance, if you're doing a job at, say, one of the universities, for example, there's a lot of stakeholders, isn't there? And they all have to be appeased at the right time.
Yeah, and it's a case of also forward planning. How long does that take to happen? So if we want to, using crane as a generality, like we can't just crane something up if you've got to close down the street. So you engage with, a traffic management company and leave it to the pros. And then they go over to Melbourne City Council and get approval letters, which can take up to 14 days. Furthermore, they go and do letterbox drops around the neighbourhood. There's a traffic management situation happening here on, Friday morning at 7 a.m. And then, you've got to ensure that, the stakeholders who are in the building are also aware of what's going on. So, for example, this university, had, I think, around 50 people with all different machines and their day-to-day happening. Like, they've got to be aware that we're shutting down the street. What if they were bringing in, some sizable, cargo or something for one of their experiments and they didn't know about it? Like, we don't want to be in the business of stitching people up, that's for sure. So
it seems that your role involves precision, documentation, organisation, but some pretty damn good people skills. Because you are, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. And as I always say, like a customer, they're dealing with, say, Greenwood. It's not Greenwood the company, it's Greenwood the people. And these stakeholders are people. So you have to take their needs into consideration and the ability to see what they require and still respond in accordance to, the confines of the economic reality of a business that we're in. It can be pretty hard.
Yeah, no, it's a hard role, but it's really enjoyable when you get validation that you're on the right track. I think that's the biggest thing. It doesn't matter what the site is, whether it be a 3.2 kilowatt system for a darling old grandmother who lives in Camberwell that we've done, which we've done, to, some of the biggest solar installs and, the most exciting things that we do. It's a case of when things are going right, you're like, all right, I'm on the right track here. Let's continue to go. But at the same time, getting feedback is critical as well. What can I do to improve? Not thinking it in my head, but asking the leading hand at one of the council rollouts. What do you want to see more of? What can we do to make your job easier? Because, my job, whilst it's mental, isn't very physical per se. Whereas, they get everything on site. The physicality, the mentality, the working away from home, homesickness is huge. So it's, boots on the roof is a really demanding job, and I'm just trying to make their job as easy as possible. So again, follow-ups, being in communication with people, and also, probably realistic targets and things like that. It's sort of like, all right, well, just think for a sec. How long will this crane lift take? Is it going to take 4 hours or is it going to take 8 hours?
Yeah, right.
Don't say 4, say 8. And if it only takes 4, then you've exceeded their expectations. So that's one thing that we're always trying to do better.
Makes perfect sense. I was going to ask this question, which I will. For someone who wants to become a project coordinator or even a project manager, because I see those two roles pretty damn similar. They're pretty similar. There's a lot of crossover. What would be your best advice for someone starting out who may be a solar installer doing residential or someone who's just doing some smaller jobs and they want to move into the commercial field, what would be your advice from a project coordinator's perspective? What's the best thing they can do? What's the first thing they should do?
Good question. Start small for starters. I don't think trying to be, the biggest and the best necessarily is the way to go. So, taking your time and learning the field and what goes into a job and what happens if, something doesn't go to plan. What are the ramifications? Someone who's been from an operations point of view in any field would be, a good project coordinator to a degree, but also understanding the steps of solar, which is insanely critical. If you don't know the industry, you need to obviously have done, some pre-work before you get into that project coordination role to understand what the moving parts are. With any job, if we're doing it, first thing I go is what's the lead time? And if it's too short, then the customer needs to be aware of it. And why? Because if there's like a PVDB or something that GridSafe make, that's got a lead time. A grid application has a lead time. So if there's a big site, you need to allow at least 8 weeks to 12 weeks before you're even going to get on the roof.
Wow.
So because, JS or our team need to, set the tick boxes there and sometimes there's voltage loggers that need to be put onto a site and that can disrupt things. So, but at the same time, I look at our Gantt chart, more than I check my email because I'm looking at what's coming up in 9-10 weeks time. Are we ready for that? What's involved in these jobs and not 3 weeks beforehand or 3 days beforehand going, how are we, where are we getting the panels from? So it's just being really articulate and learning the hard way as well. Learning what hasn't worked in situations and making it better. That's
almost as important as learning what does work as well. I want to ask you about supplies, right? A lot of businesses use multiple suppliers. Some businesses use one. Is there any advantage, like for instance with these commercial solar jobs, to get all your supplies from, say, one wholesaler? Or is it better to spread those supplies across 2 or 3? Or is it project specific?
It's project specific. So Greenwood are agnostic. So we're not in bed with one specific brand of panel or inverter. We obviously recognise, value for money has never been more important. I agree, but I'm talking more from a wholesaler perspective. Let's say we go, we're going to buy everything from one electrical wholesaler, as opposed to we're going to buy our components from 10 electrical wholesalers. Is there any? What's the better approach in your mind from your own experience? We tend to deal with 2 or 3 real close-knit partner connections for the reasons that they're incredibly easy to deal with and they are always available to help. And stuff doesn't always run smoothly. Sometimes, we need to adjust and get an order instead of tomorrow. We need it today because that's just the way that the planets have aligned. You've hit the nail on the head. They're always ready to help. Yeah. And that can only be achieved by forging a relationship with them. And the way I see it is if you're getting your components from 10 different wholesalers, how do you actually develop a good relationship with any one of them? So if there is an issue on site, they're probably not going to come to the party, as opposed to if you deal with 2, 3 or 4. We do that pretty calculated that we want to give our business to 3 or 4 of the ones that really look after us and we look after them. It goes hand in hand. Yeah. So if I was definitely starting my own solar business, which I'm not, I would be looking at, all right, I want 2 or 3 really key supply chain partners. I think too, the good thing from an economic perspective also is that you can start to develop a good credit set up with 1 or 2 wholesalers. And then you start getting these economies of scale through discounted prices if you're starting to buy in bulk, etc., as opposed to go, I'm going to save $5 buying my DC isolator from those guys and I'll buy my cable from them because they're $2 cheaper per 500 metre roll than them. You end up spending all this time to save pennies when in reality, if you
consolidate it down to 2 or 3 wholesalers, and in some cases even one, you're going to get a better deal.
Yeah.
And hopefully better service because you become a valued customer to them.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is everyone's incredibly time poor. Everyone.
Can't make more time.
Exactly. So, you know, it's a case of how can I execute something in the shortest amount of time and do it well and get it on the blower to, you know, our you know, wonderful supply partners and going, hey, I need this. Can you make it happen? Leave it with me. That's like, to me, that's awesome. And also then trust.
Yep.
Talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Anyone can talk. I'll get it. I'll make it happen, you know. And we've seen that in the past. We saw it when we were doing a home renovation. Like, people will promise the world and they underdeliver, and it just, it annoys you. So everyone we deal with in the solar game is awesome.
Back to this project managing, coordinating. I was at a company many years ago, and I was project managing 3 projects. They were all about 100 kilowatt, right? And I was doing it in my head because I thought I was smart enough. Well, let me tell you, I stuffed up big time. I miscalculated racking and cabling on one of those projects. I did the calculations for 2 projects, not 3. And the company I was with at the time lost a shitload of money. So a lot of money, a lot of money because of my mistake. And then I finally realised I should have been listening to my wife, who was all about documentation. And if you're not naturally like that, develop those skills, I reckon. I'm not. I was never like that. But I had to develop skills from a documentation point of view, because no matter how smart you are, no matter how good your memory is, you'll stuff up eventually. But if you've got a checklist and something stuffs up, then you improve your checklist.
Yep.
And at least you've got something there. So I'm always about whatever you do, document it so you can pass it on to someone else. It improves. It's stating the bleeding obvious, but it's surprising how many people don't follow the obvious.
Yeah.
So,
I like to document as well, because getting back to the time thing, someone might ask, have the panels been ordered? And I'd say, go to Monday or go to Slack, you'll get the answers, you know. So it's all there and obviously I give them an answer, but at the same time you can see the paper trail of where I've been, which is a huge thing, not only to double check what I'm doing, but also, you know, people can see, oh, he's ordered the panels, great. I don't need to call him. I don't need to spend 3 minutes on the phone for either him or I to get an answer I can just see on a screen. So yeah, I'm a big believer as well. Documentation is always something to try and do the best you can. But yeah, our worlds are hectic, because, you know, we've coming out of this COVID, you know, spell, which we've been at home, and you know, kids have been at home, and you've been adjusted to a certain way of life, and it's been awesome in a bad world to be able to see my kids grow up literally before my eyes.
Join the club.
Yeah. And now to everything sort of really just ramping up hard from Australia Day, and it's like, all right, well, just now is the time to really test the skill set and ensure that documentation is done, because we've never been busier.
Well, things have changed, haven't they? But I think process and procedures should always be looked at. It's funny when, again, it's not natural for me, and I go, oh, it sounds so mechanistic, we have to put everything in these dots. But you do. If you've written a process and a procedure and something goes wrong, well, then go back over your process, your procedure, and go, well, oh, maybe I'll alter that. It's like swims. They're living documents, and each time we do a job, they should be improved.
Yep.
I remember way back when we were taking some conduit onto a roof. It was the first story, you know, it was a ground floor roof, right? So we were just handing it up, and the guy was wearing he usually wore glasses, but he took them off, and for some weird reason, I don't know how, this 32 mil conduit came out and just came out of the pack and whacked him in the eye. And if it had been 25, he would have been really bad. So, of course, straight away, lifting, swims, adjusted, lifting packs of conduit onto the roof, bloody wear your safety glasses.
Yeah.
PPE is very important. And I think in our next conversation, we'll talk a bit about, you know, OH&S, PPE and the dangers on site, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with electricity, which is, you know, hey, solar can be dangerous, can't it?
100%. Yeah, I look forward to the next, next opportunity. It's good to, you know, give a bit of, you advice out there on what I do, and I appreciate it.
And Andre, I know you have to go to do what you need to do. Thanks. This is good. It's first of many.
It's fun. Yeah, no,
So,
it's good.
Yeah, it's interesting, and hopefully whoever's listening to this and will be listening to this will gain something concrete that they can apply to their own business, and hopefully they'll be successful too.